welcome back. This is lesson 11.5 journal, fractions and volume. I will be able to correctly calculate the volume with fractional dimensions. Vocabulary for this lesson. A solid figure is a three-dimensional shape that has length, width, and depth. The base of a solid figure is the base shape. Prism, we know, has two bases and then four rectangular lateral sides. And volume is how much space an object takes up. So, pull out your vocabulary sheet. We're going to finish this up today. So volume is the amount of three-dimensional space an object takes up, or the amount of three-dimensional space inside. So a lot of times when we're measuring volume, we're trying to figure out how much we can fit inside like a box, or maybe inside of a room or a pool. You're trying to figure out how much space that is. It's always measured in cubic units. Okay, cubic units are cubes that are 1 unit wide, 1 unit tall, and 1 unit deep that are used to measure volume. So, a unit, just a regular unit, is one-dimensional. You're measuring the distance from one point to one point. So this is just 1 unit. Oh, you can't see that. So 1 unit has length and length only. Length only. A square unit has length and width. But it's two-dimensional. So this is one-dimensional, two-dimensional, and a cubic unit is 1 unit wide, so it has length, width, and height. So you can measure it in 3 dimensions. All right, let's go back to our page. So on this prism, it says, what is the base shape of this prism? Every side has a rectangle, so that means our base shape must be a rectangle. There are no other options. Okay, since all the sides are rectangles, let's select which one to use as the base. How about we select this right side? So let's select the right one to use as the base. So if I'm selecting this as the base right here, this one that's shaded, how many cubes does it take to cover? You know, I'm changing it. Let's use the bottom one. It's just easier for our brains to visualize. We'll use the bottom one for the base. Okay, so let's visualize this bottom layer. How many cubes does it take to cover the base? So if I'm covering this bottom layer, it's going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but then another row of 5 on the bottom. This would take 10 cubes to cover that bottom layer. Now, how many layers does it take to make it to the other base? Well, if the bottom is my base, that means my other base would be my top. So how many layers to get from here to here? 1, 2, 3, 4 layers tall. So 4 layers. So how many cubes in total does it take to make this prism? So 10 groups, or 10 in each group times 4 groups would mean a total of 40 cubes. So prove this mathematically. Well, we can take and find the area of the base, which was 5 times 2, and it gives us 10, but then we times it by 4 because it was 4 layers tall, and that gave us 40 cubes. So the first thing we did was find the area of the base shape. The area of this bottom shape was 10 units. So the area of the base equaled 10. The second thing we did was we multiplied that area by the height from base to base. So the height of the prism. So the volume of any prism can be found by taking the area of the base shape and timesing it by the height or distance from base to base. Now, what would the volume of the prism be if each cube had a side length of 1/2 inch each? So if we were looking at this prism, but each one had a length of 1/2 inch. So the length of the prism up here, if each one of these was half, the length 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, that would be 1, 2, and a half. So the length of the prism would be 5 cubes. And 5 cubes would be the same as 2 1/2 inches. Okay, the width of our prism was 2 cubes. And if each cube was 1/2 inch, that would mean that it would be 1 inch wide. The height of our prism was 1, 2, 3, 4 cubes tall. So that would be 2 inches total if each one is 1/2 inch. So if we found the area of the base shape, that would be 2.5 times 1. And 2.5 times 1 gives us 2.5. Because anything times 1 is 2.5, is itself. Now we're going to multiply that number by the height from base to base. And the height was 2 inches total. So I'm going to do 2.5 times 2. To make that easier, this I'm going to write as a mixed, or as an improper fraction, times this as an improper fraction. Cross cancel here, gives me 1 and 1. That gives me a total of 5/1, or 2.5 times 2, which is 5. So the volume of this prism would be 5 inches cubed. So if you remember that, it's going to help you. So go ahead and turn the page. So what if the base, or let's try this one now. What is the base shape of this prism? Okay, it looks to me like the base shape is a square. So the base shape is a square here. Why do I know that? Because 4 times 4. So since all the sides are rectangles again, let's use the bottom one to use as the base. many cubes does it take to cover the base? Okay, if I was looking at the bottom, it's going to be the same as the top. That's going to take 4 times 4, which would give me 16 cubes. How many layers does it take to make it to the other base? So to get from this base to this base, it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 layers. So to fill up that entire prism, how many cubes in total does it take? 16 times 8 would be, I don't know what that is off the top of my head. 8 times 6 is 48, regroup 4. 8 times 1 is 8, plus 4 more is 12. So we get 128. That would be 128 cubes. So prove that mathematically. The volume of any prism is the area of the base shape then times it by the distance or the height from base to base. So the area of this shape, let's see, it says, now what would the volume of the prism be if each cube had a side length of 1/3 inch each? Okay, so the length of the prism base was 4. If each one is 1/3 of an inch, 1/3 times 4 would give me 1 1/3 inches. The width is 4 cubes. 4 times 1/3 means that whole thing would be 1/3, 2/3, 3/3, 4/3, or 1 whole and 1/3 more. The height of the prism would be 8 cubes, and if each one is 1/3 of a unit big, 1/3 times 8 would be 8/3, or 2 2/3. Well, now I know the height of each one. Remember that the volume of any prism is the area of the base shape so the area of this base shape would be 1 1/3 inches times 1 1/3 inches. So 1 1/3 times 1 1/3, to make that easier to do, I'm going to make this 4/3 and this one 4/3. 4 times 4 is 16, over 3 times 3 is 9. That's the same as, 9 goes into 16 one whole time, and that leaves me with 7 left over, so 1 7/9 inches squared. That's just the area. Now we're going to multiply that number by the height from base to base. Multiply that number by the height, so we're going to take 1 7/9 inches, which we know is 16/9 already, and times it by the height, which is 2 2/3. Well, 2 2/3, this would be the same as 2 times 3 is 6, plus 2 more would be 8. Well, remember it was 8 cubes high. 8 times 1/3, that's where that came from. Multiply across the top. I can't cross cancel anything. So 16 times 8 is 128. Oh, remember seeing that before? It was 128 cubes. Well, now we're going to divide that by 9 times 3, which is 27. Well, I don't know how many times 127 is going to go into 128, but I'm going to guess about 5. So divide 128 by 27. 27 doesn't go in here, and it doesn't go in here. 27 times 5 is my guess. 5 times 7 is 35. Regroup 3. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 3 more is, oh, that's close, but too much, so it's going to be 4. 27 times 4. 4 times 7 is 28. Regroup 2. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 2 more is 10. 108, so minus 108 leaves me with 20 pieces left over. So that means my fraction would be 4 and 20 out of 27 inches. Now we're in volume now, so it'll be inches cubed. We've timed inches by inches by inches. So the volume of this prism would be 4 and 27 inches cubed. Alright, volume of a prism song. Ways to remember how to do volume of a prism. So, song to Camptown Races. So if you know the song goes da 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 do da do da 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 da. So here's how it goes. Volume of a prism, easy, easy. First you need to find the base, first you need to find the length. Let's see, I think I messed up the words. First you need to find the length and the height of that base. So first you need to find the length and height of it. With that, I'm messing this one up, sorry guys. So first you need to find the length and the height of that base. So if you know what base it is, if it's a square or a rectangle or a triangle, so you're going to find the area. So with that area times it by the height. Okay, so with that area, times it by the height. The height is the length from base to base. The height is the length from base to base. Then put a right label in place. Okay, so here's how it goes. Volume of a prism, easy, easy. First you need to find the length and the height of that base. With that area times it by the height. The height is the length from base to base. Put a right label in place. So look, we've always found the area of the base shape. Then we times it by the height from how tall it was from base to base. Then make sure you put a label in place of inches cubed or whatever it is. Alright, remember that song and rate yourself on this concept 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Take a picture and turn it in on Google Classroom.